What is up, everybody? Welcome to the Action Network podcast presented by BetMGM. I'm your host, Chris Raybon, and this is your NFL Week 2 betting preview, where we will talk about our favorite sides, totals, teasers, survivor picks, underdog, moneyline dogs, and of course, crack open our weekly Sunday six-pack of Against the Spread bets with the help of my co-host, the Prime Minister of Degenerate Nation, Stucky Stuck. What is good?
What's up, brother? Good to be back for week 2. Usually one of my favorite weeks, overreaction week. Although I think the market's getting sharper in that regard. It was a good week for us in week 1. Although I have no love for Shane Steichen and the play calling of the Colts to not get 1 yard. Anthony Richardson gets hurt. Just run the ball. You would have ran it in. Every NFL teams always score in that. So.
Did you see him miss the tush push too? They tried to tush push and got stuffed. That's the first time I've ever seen it stuffed, ever.
Yeah.
So,
that was a painful one, but shout to Vrabel, the dog god, for kicking the field goal.
Oh my
down
goodness.
4. And then we had a sweat of review. So that was and then luckily the Saints got a first down. So that was the fun sweats being back. My biggest headlines from week 1 were unders dominated. The QB play across the board was really poor, with a few exceptions. Like just the yards per attempt, historically
6.3 week 1, 6.3.
A lot of rust and QB rust and a lot of hamstring injuries going into and out of week 1. I think both of those things are correlated with just the lack of preseason reps. We always say that preseason doesn't matter. Like look at Kenny Pickett to look like a star in preseason, but reps do matter. Right. And just the amount there's just some general rust across the board. And then you're not getting reps out there. Then you're on full speed. And I think that leads to more hamstring, Achilles type injuries. Road teams continue their success, which has been a trend over the past 5 years as home field advantage continues to diminish. But obviously the biggest storyline of the weekend was Aaron Rodgers lasting 4 plays. He'll have one pass attempt, which will be, I believe, the fewest number of attempts for a week 1 starting quarterback in NFL history. And of course it happened to the Jets, who saw something similar happen in 1999.
Yep.
When they had the defense, the running backs, the wide receivers with Corbett and Keyshawn Johnson. And they brought in Vinny Testaverde and he tore his Achilles, I think in the first quarter.
I had him on my fantasy team. And that was back when, you didn't have like 100 fantasy teams like I do now. Like I had like 1 or 2 and he was my quarterback and I was just devastated.
That was the end of the Bill Parcells era. And then Belichick didn't want to take the job with the Jets. He did take it originally, then didn't, and ended up going to the Patriots. But we all know how that ended. But Parcells then turned to a punter as a quarterback.
Tom Tuchel.
So I was wondering, he was like a former quarterback, then he turned punter. And then he ended up going to like 3 quarterbacks that year. So
was that the Ray Lucas year?
Ray Lucas, who won 6 of 8, I think, to close the year. But they finished 8-8 that season. But I did start to contemplate, should the Jets consider putting their punter in at quarterback
instead of Zach Wilson? Absolutely.
Yeah, but we'll get to that game. And just some foreshadowing. This is the ugliest 3 picks I've ever had in the Sunday 6-pack, so I apologize in advance.
All right, let's start it out with some Thursday night football. All right, we got the Vikings going to Philadelphia to take on the Eagles. The line is 6.5 at BetMGM. The total is 49. I think a couple of interesting things about this one. One is that, shouts to Sean Kerner and Nick Giffen, our guys with the luck rankings. And Minnesota has the biggest luck gap of week 2. So they got pretty unlucky in that Bucs game. And also, as you and I were talking about, you pointed out that N'Kobe Dean, who was already replacing, stepping in for linebackers that they lost, rocking the green dot, he's going to be out as well. So on a short week, that could pose some issues for Philadelphia. What are you thinking here?
Yeah, because then you had Chris Ellis came in, and he was horrendous. It's either him, maybe Reed Blankenship gets the green dot, but you also have to consider Fletcher Cox got a little banged up, and these things are important on a short week. And James Bradbury, most important, like when you have a concussion on a short week, you're pretty much never going to play. And that's big against this Vikings offense because they have like a more explosive number 2 wide receiver who I liked what I saw from last week in Jordan Addison. And this is like a Justin Jefferson, who for my money is the best receiver in the NFL, revenge game. Like he got shut down last year in Philly against Darius Slay for the most part. And I'm sure it's going to come out with a vengeance here. We'll see if Slay shadows across the field, which is more likely now without Bradbury. You're going to get a lot of Josh Jobe, there's a lot of moving parts for this defense, which was already weak up the middle. I do have to say Jalen Carter was dominant. I think he had 8 pressures for the Eagles, which is a little bit of a concern against the Vikings' interior offensive line. And because the Vikings' offensive line is dealing with a couple injuries as well. But if, when I look at this game from afar, and it is Thursday night, which always makes me a little skittish. There's like a lot of rust in these primetime games. But these primetime games have been going under at a crazy clip.
Oh, yeah.
Which I think has given us a little value on this number. And the fact that the Vikings only scored 17 points last week, but they should have scored more. They had 370 yards and averaged 6 yards per play. They were moving the ball up and down the field. They just kept turning it over. I think they had a couple fumbles in the red zone. So the offense actually looked pretty good. And then the Vikings defense, as we talked about last week, we expected Brian Flores to blitz a ton. That's his MO. He's a very aggressive coordinator. And he did. He blitzed on 47.2% of Mayfield's dropbacks. Last year, under Donatel, they blitzed 21%. So he more than doubled the blitz rate for the Vikings, which makes sense. That's what he does. And you have to mask the horrible secondary on the back end. So there's 2 things here. One, Mayfield really struggled against the blitz in the first half, but then really got a hang of what the Vikings were trying to do. There was even talk of like him knowing the signals. And then in the second half, he went 7 of 8 against the blitz with a touchdown. I think he had a long touchdown pass, and then he had a game-sealing third down pass against the blitz as well. And what's going to happen when Flores does this, now you're going up against an even more potent offense with a quarterback who's even more mobile in Jalen Hurts, and obviously a much better offensive line. But this Vikings defense it's so bad on the back end, and that they're going to play aggressive to mask it. Flores is going to do that. So they're going to give up a ton of explosive plays. That's just what's going to happen this year against really competent offenses. And that's really what you want for an over. You don't want, teams marching methodically down the field. So I think both passing offenses can have a lot of success downfield with explosive passing plays, which would lead to an over here. So, yeah, Eagles defensive injuries, Eagles offense against this aggressive Vikings defense with not much on the back end. Flores doesn't have much prep time here. And that's one of that Vikings are really going to rely on Flores as like game planning and scheming for opponents. So I think they're at a disadvantage in that aspect as well. So I think all of those things lead me to a rare Thursday night over.
Yeah, this is definitely going to be one of your most disgusting podcasts, pick-wise, all across the board. A Thursday night over. You already kind of foreshadowed some of your picks in the 6-pack.
My total's an over too.
Second week in a row, huh? I mean, I didn't know. I didn't even. It's funny. I didn't even end up. I ended up moving off the Green Bay total because of Watson and everything, and then it still flew over, of course. But good for the pod. But yeah, we had double over last week, so we'll see what happens this week. But yeah, I do agree with you on. I think that loss of Nakobe Dean, wearing the green dot, that can go overlooked, especially on a short week. I think that is going to be key. And Minnesota left a lot of points out on the field, as you mentioned, against a pretty solid Bucs defense. That maybe they aren't that solid. They gave up a busted coverage touchdown to Jordan Addison too. So, I do think the over is the play. I would not feel comfortable laying the points with Philly. Again, Vikings, one of the most unlucky teams, and you never know when you have a guy like Justin Jefferson, Addison, these talented guys. You get a couple of big plays, and Vikings, I wouldn't be surprised if they won the game. So don't really want to touch it, but I'll be rooting for you on the over. All right, let's get into what we've all been waiting for week in, week out. It's time for the week number 2 Sunday 6-pack.
Thirsty for action? Let's crack open the Sunday 6-pack.
All right, 6-pack went 4-2 as we mentioned last week. Would have gone 5-1 if Indy could get that first and goal deep in. What was it? First and goal at the 5, second and goal at the 2, and somehow they don't score. Brutal, but still a good week. I'm up 5-4. Hit the total. You didn't. You have first pick. Where are you going?
All right, I said it's going to be ugly, and I did consider the Chiefs for what it's worth. We'll talk about that game later. But that line has gone from 2.5, which I would have loved. Anytime I'm going to give Mahomes under a field goal, I'm going there. But it's gone to 3, and then as we're recording this, it jumped to 3.5, which might be related to some Travis Kelce news. But so passing on the Chiefs, and for my first pick, so look, it would have been nice. Hey, we're backing Patrick Mahomes under a field goal. Nope, for my first pick of the week 2 Sunday 6-pack, I am going with the New York Football Jets plus 9.5 against the Dallas Cowboys. Yes, I'm backing Zach Wilson, who I've thrown under the bus countless times. So I like this bet for 2 reasons. I'm showing a little bit of value in the number. I make this just a tad over a touchdown. But there's a couple things I think working in the Jets' favor. Number one, you're catching over a touchdown in the NFL with a super low total, which is always going to be intriguing. And getting this Jets rushing attack and their defense, when you can get this defense, which is showed once again, it might be the best in the NFL, going up against another team that can also make that case. Catching over a touchdown, it's always going to catch my eyes. Additionally, look, Aaron Rodgers is a huge loss. The market has adjusted, close to a touchdown here. I had questions about Aaron Rodgers coming into the year, so we didn't know. It wasn't necessarily prime Aaron Rodgers we've seen over the past 2 seasons. I only have him worth, close to about 4.5 to 5 points this year. There's also just a psychological factor of the Jets. Everyone has written them off, right? Now you're going in on the road into battle with a, superior team. Everyone is saying your season's over. This is it's kind of like you see this in the NBA when your star is out and everyone steps up. But this is like the type of game where everybody steps up. And I think you see just a spirited us against the world Jets effort. Happy to take 9.5 with this defense. Last week, I know that the Cowboys' love is at an all-time high. What did we really learn, though? We knew their defense was going to be dominant. It's been a top 3 defense the past 2 years. They also, they had a punt, blocked field goal for a touchdown, a pick 6, and then that game just got out of hand against an overmatched Giants team. There's still some questions about this Dallas offense. The offensive line isn't at 100%, which could be a problem against this nasty Jets defensive front. So I'm taking the points with Zach Wilson. I'm sure I'll regret it, but let's go to war.
Was not sure. I was not sure if you were going to go that way just because of Zach. Like I knew the Jets were a stucky pick, but I know you've been trying to not back Zach lately. So was wondering if you were going to do it, but
maybe they use their punter and a quarterback, and it goes well. But no, this has the potential to be a really low scoring game. Like I would also look at the under. I think you might.
I have something on that
later.
Yeah, so
but that makes the points even more intriguing and appetizing for me. So yeah, show a little bit of value. I like the spot. Everyone has just written the Jets off, and I think the Jets can have some success running the ball, and that defense is going to keep them in most games.
Yeah, it's really about their defense. Their defense is straight nasty, and they've held down. Well, you know what? I'll talk about it in the under, but yeah, they've held down Josh Allen 3 straight times now.
Yep.
It's not many defenses can do that. For my first pick and the second overall of the week 2 Sunday 6-pack, I'm gonna get pretty ugly myself here, and go with the Seattle Seahawks plus 5.5 at the Detroit Lions. The Seahawks team that, what did they do? Just 5 straight 3-and-outs in the second half last week. They were up 13-7, and then it just all went downhill. Still might have tackle issues, but I think this is too many points against this Lion team, even on long rest. The biggest thing for Seattle last week wasn't even their tackles. It was that they couldn't handle Aaron Donald. Damian Lewis, I believe he had a 7.9 PFF pass blocking grade. That might be the lowest grade I've ever seen them give. Aaron Donald got 1 sack, 4 hurries, 5 pressures in total. I believe they all came on Lewis. He just dominated. The Lions, I like, Hutchinson on the edge, but they don't have the same, no one really has the same type of player as Aaron Donald on the interior. So I'm not as worried. And let's not forget Seattle last season, when the hype was kind of building up with Detroit was favored by more than a field goal at home, and Seattle went and rolled up 48 points on them and snuck out 48-45. But Seattle was up most of that, that game was a little, the score wasn't that close. I think Detroit scored late, but I think Seattle still has enough here to keep it close with Detroit, if not win this game. They still have talented players at the skill positions. Geno's still not going to make a ton of mistakes. I thought Seattle was one of the more unlucky teams, and Detroit was one of the luckier teams last week. Our luck rankings agree. This is one of the 4 games with a luck gap of over 100%. And the luck differential in terms of rank between the two teams is 24. So, that signifies a pretty high against the spread hit rate right there as it is. But I just look at the Seattle team and I don't see that big of a gap. Even, the tackles, yes, they were, they're solid and they were, for rookies, they exceeded expectations, but let's not act like these are elite tackles or anything like that. And, one of the backups for Seattle came in last week and did fine. I think the issue is more on the interior. I don't think Detroit is going to pose that same kind of issue. And also, Sean McVay, division game last week, all offseason to prepare. It just painted Seattle, I think, in the worst possible light. But this is still a team, I think, that still has some talent, and I still think they can win a shootout in this game against Detroit if they have to. But, Detroit, for all the hype, and, I was on them week 1 against Kansas City, but, I mean, you put up 21 points against Kansas City in a
14.
game. Huh? Well, yeah, really, 14 on offense, right? 14. You get handed a lucky pick 6, and that's with Chris Jones out. That's with all offseason to prepare. That's with no one ever having seen film on what you're going to do with Jahmyr Gibbs. The hype. It's just there's too much hype with this Detroit team right now. So let's go Seattle plus 5.5. And if you want some trends, this is week 2. This is classic overreaction week. The teams that looked great, Detroit beats Kansas City. Those teams tend to struggle. And then teams that looked terrible, like Seattle did, tend to do well. So let's see. We have a week 2 dogs off a loss going against a favorite that was a dog in week 1, 47-25 against the spread since 2005. 65%. You have week 2 road teams off a double-digit loss since 2005, 36-21 against the spread, 63%. Week 2 underdogs plus 6 or less that didn't cover in week 1, 64% against the spread since 05 at 58-33. I mean, the trends are endless here. This is how you bet week 2. You find a team that the public is down on or that struggled, that there's not really as big of a gap. I mean, I don't think the Lions should be getting, laying 5.5, 6 against many teams. Not yet anyway. So give me Seattle.
Yeah, another one. Week 2 favorites of over a field goal after winning as a dog in week 1, which applies to the Lions and Bucs this week, are 38.5% over the past 25 years. In week 2, this is the spot. The Seahawks are the spot. I I just don't know if I can get there. I mean, I was low on the Seattle team, lower than the market. I was lower than you on them. I mean, you go back to the second half of last year, we started to see the cracks. Like, there are only 2 wins were over the Rams backup quarterbacks. By the way, the circle of life in the NFC West, the 49ers own the Rams, who own the Seahawks, who own the 49ers. So that rang true again. But, yeah, and the Lions are off a pretty fluky win. They do have extra rest, but I'm just worried that Seattle might be a fraud. Their deep could take a big step back, and Geno was just, a half a season flash in the pan. And you look, and we'll learn a lot this week, because last year they torched the Detroit defense, which, Hutchinson's a stud. Harrison McNeil a potential on the D-line, but the rest of the secondary and linebacker are major questions outside of C.J. Gardner-Johnson, who played well against the Chiefs and has a proven track record. But, yeah, you mentioned Lewis, who was awful at guard. But if you're missing both your tackles, it's not like they're all pros, but, Curhan and Forsythe, they're like an undrafted guy, a 7th round guy. They don't have much experience. I mean, they signed Jason Peters, who's 41. But in the first half, you take all those offensive line injuries. The first half, the Seahawks, against the Rams, by the way, the Rams have a horrendous defense. They scored 13 points. They had 10 first downs. They averaged 5.5 yards per play. EPA per play, positive 0.12. The second half, where they didn't have their starting tackles, no points, no first downs, 0.9 yards per play, negative 0.754 EPA per play. I mean, that is horrific. So I agree. Seahawks are the spot. I just think that they might be a fraud. And we might end up keep downgrading them as the season goes on, but we'll see. This is definitely the week 2 spot. So I can't hate on you for this pick. For my second pick and the third overall of the week 3 Sunday 6-pack, I'm going with the Buffalo Bills minus 9.5, we'll call it. Shop around as always. Think you might be able to find an 8.5 or a 9 out there. I think that is one of the overreactions that might be happening from week 1 is I saw people say Josh Allen is no longer good. He's bad. This is back to what everyone thought. Well, are we just throwing out his entire track record in the NFL? By the way, this is not the first or the last time he will struggle against the Jets. Go back to last year when he looked horrible. He had no touchdowns, 2 interceptions against the Jets, I believe like week 8. And then they lost that fluky game to the Vikings when that game in the 30s in overtime. And then they won like 8 straight. It's okay. He struggled against the Jets. A lot of quarterbacks will do that. Josh Allen is a bit more inconsistent than a Mahomes, and that's why he's not at that level. But he's still one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL. This is also one of the best teams in the NFL still, at home, off of a loss, playing a Raiders team coming across the country who, won in the final seconds against the Broncos team that didn't get any pressure the entire game. I think a league low 11% pressure rate when they didn't blitz. And, so Jimmy G was comfortable in the system, hit a couple plays, and ended up scoring 17 points after a late touchdown. The Raiders offense will be okay. I think the Bills defense can do enough here to hold them in check. But it's the Raiders defense, which was going up against Russell Wilson and an offense that just wasn't stretching the field. That's not going to happen here. Their secondary, I don't think, is going to hold up. I think the dam's going to break. And I think the Bills come out in vintage Bills form and blow this game open early and keep their foot on the gas. If you look historically, Josh Allen, 37 of his 53 career regular season wins have been by more than 7 points. Over the past few seasons, under McDermott, when the Bills win, they win big because usually you're getting good Josh Allen. So I like the Bills to win this game by double digits. Look, if the Bills win that game against the Jets and the Raiders, don't get that touchdown late, I think the spread is over 10. So I'll happily take 9.5 here and count on a Josh Allen bounce back and a angry Bills double-digit win, which they've done way more times than not in this spot.
Yeah, not only did this just speaks to the Bills' greatness. Not only do they usually win big with Josh Allen and Sean McDermott, that Jet loss by 6 in overtime was their biggest regular season loss since December 12th of 2021. All 3 of their games last year that they lost in the regular season were by 3 points or 3 or less. 2 points to Miami, 3 to the Jets, and 3 to the Vikings. So, yeah, this Bills team is very good. The Jets just are very, very, very good defense. They could call, and Diggs had a decent game, and they still shut down Buffalo. So that speaks to the Jets. But yeah, Buffalo, they're going to destroy this Raider D. I think,
Yeah, I'm only worried about Crosby on Spencer Brown a bit. We'll see how.
You have Dawson Knox help out now because you got the 2 tight ends. So
so you're going to have to help out there, and then there's just with Allen's ability to buy time, especially. There's just no way that the secondary can hold up, in my opinion. So I think the Bills come out early, jump on top of the Raiders. And look, Jimmy G is a good average NFL quarterback, and he can win you games like last week, but he's not capable of keeping up with the elite quarterbacks in the NFL. And I'm not sure why, but people have forgotten that Allen is right up there at the top.
Yeah. And, Russell Wilson really didn't try that defense for whatever reason down the field. I guess that was Sean Payton's grand master plan. Wilson 5-yard average depth of target. So Josh Allen going to be a little different this week. For my second pick, the 4th overall of the week 2 Sunday 6-pack, I'm going with the Atlanta Falcons plus 1.5 at home against the Green Bay Packers. And I have Atlanta as a slight favorite here. So, interesting to me that they're laying points at home. I know Green Bay looked good. You called it. Green Bay destroyed Chicago, but that score is a little bit misleading. 38-20. That our expected score had it 22-19, like a 3-point game. So I think Green Bay, another one of those teams that got a little bit lucky, got a turnover, had some things go right for them. And when you look at this Atlanta team,
have you put your Bears future to rest yet, by the way?
No, I still got a Justin Fields MVP future. It's probably dead, but it's week 1. I mean, I still think I still have hope for the Bears, but we'll talk about that in a second. But this is not about necessarily fading Green Bay, based on me being low on them. It's me being high on Atlanta and having these teams rated fairly evenly, and yet I'm still getting more than a point with Atlanta at home. I think Green Bay is going to struggle against this run game. We've seen them struggle against the run game in the past. Also, a little different with Atlanta. They're going to be able to put some heavier personnel on the field. Chicago wasn't doing that. I think Tunyon came into that game banged up. Blasen game, they weren't, not really a great option there. But I think Atlanta, heavy personnel, really like what Arthur Smith is doing. He's kind of finding a way for Desmond Ridder to not lose the Falcons games. He went 15 out of 18 because he was just throwing gimmies to the playmakers. And now you have, Drake London. You still have Kyle Pitts kind of waiting to be unleashed. Bijan looked great. Tyler Algier, a guy I loved in fantasy, looked great. So I just think this is a coin flip game that the Green Bay Packers are, favored on the road. I don't like it. Give me the Falcons' second straight road game also for the Pack. So give me the Falcons. And again, had that expected score for Green Bay was like 17 points below the total, below their actual total. So that's a spot I want to attack in week 2. And all the same trends I mentioned for Seattle, Detroit apply here. So I won't list them again, but I have 10 60+% trends for the Atlanta Falcons. But bottom line, I just think these two teams are fairly even. I think Atlanta can run on Green Bay, and I don't think they should be laying points on at home.
Yeah, I don't mind this one at all. I love both these teams coming into the year. The Falcons' offensive line, very good run blockers across the board. I mean, I guess Bergeron is the 1 weak piece there. It's still major question marks, but they will commit to the run, and they should have success running on this Packers defense that historically has struggled against the run. Gary was still limited. He was dominant. He was in it for 10 passing snaps and had 5 pressures, which is insane. Quay Walker was great too, which Packers fans love to see, but he did suffer concussion worth watching. But some of the things I like from the Falcons, Onyemata and Bates, two of their big acquisitions that we talked about on the defensive side of the ball, they were both great last week. So that should help the defense. There's still not a lot of consistent edge rush, but they now are pretty good in the interior, and they might be able to take advantage of Josh Myers in that aspect. I still have some questions about him and his consistency. And don't forget, the Packers have some injuries. We don't know if Watson will be good to go, and that's important against a Falcons team that does have one really good corner in A.J. Terrell. And then Aaron Jones, and one of the many, hamstring and those type of injuries that we saw last week. We don't know if he's good to go. And he is, when he's on the field, he's just an explosive play waiting to happen. And Dillon just doesn't have that same level of explosiveness, like on the screen passes and in the passing game in particular, but just across the board. So the Packers also aren't at 100% full strength. But yeah, I think the Packers run D did show some promise last week against the Bears, who want to run it a lot, but it's one data point. Game script wasn't really there, and Falcons have a much better D than the Bears, in my opinion. They have a much better offensive line, and they should commit and have success running the ball. So I don't mind this. Great spot here. For my third pick and the 5th overall, the Week 3 Sunday 6-pack. Look, I told you we're going ugly. We're laying 9.5. We're taking 9.5 with Zach Wilson. So let's throw another Wilson in, this time a second favorite. I don't know if I've ever done this, maybe once. But we're going to lay 3.5 with the Denver Broncos at home against the Washington Commanders. And look, I'm scared to death. I need Russell Wilson to win by more than a field goal. But I think this is a really good spot to back the Broncos, who have historically been good early in the season at home in altitude in the first couple weeks of the season. But you're basically laying the same price that you were last week against the Raiders. And I have the Raiders power rated a couple points higher than Washington. And I watched earlier this week, I watched that entire Washington game because Sam Howell took 6 sacks. I'm like, how the hell did he take 6 sacks against this Arizona defense? Last year, J.J. Watt, I think, had like half of their sacks. And he's no longer there, obviously. So I watched the game. Howell was so indecisive. Wasn't even all on the offensive line, which did struggle, but so indecisive, holding the ball way too long, which just led to mistakes. And even when Arizona wasn't generating a pass rush, they were able to get to Howell. And that's important for this Broncos defense, which generated no pressure last week. I expect their defense to come out with a tear on fire after that performance last week. But they don't even need to generate a lot of pressure. Howell, I just don't think he's ready yet, and the market is rating him too highly from what I've seen. And I did like some of the things I saw from the Broncos offense last week, which Peyton installed. He went so much more heavy play action this year than they did last year. A lot of extra protectors in there. I think they had 6 offensive linemen, a lot more. And Russ was really efficient. Now, the missing piece, there was no explosiveness, but he didn't make mistakes. He was really efficient, just nickel and diming down the field. That's where potentially Jerry Jeudy comes in. They need him. I don't know if he's going to play, another hamstring guy, but I'm willing to take the risk that there's a chance that he's in there and he can help take the top off of defenses and provide that spark for the explosive plays, because I really like the scheme. And this is a big coaching advantage too, right? And I'll take Sean Payton over Ron Rivera any day of the week. And I expect Payton to make some tweaks. Hopefully you get Jeudy in there. And, because the Broncos have a lot of injuries, I have to say. I mean, Dulcich is also banged up, and you already lost Patrick, and there's some injuries on the defensive side of the ball. But I just think it's a good bounce-back spot for the Broncos, and I'm just not a believer in this Washington team after what I saw last week. I just don't think Hal is ready to go into a very hostile environment and not make mistakes, which could decide this game. So I think we're getting the Broncos cheap here. Probably the first and last time I'll lay over a field goal with Russell Wilson, but let's give it a go. Broncos -3.5.
Yeah, I was thinking about the under for this game. I don't trust Howe either, but that Bronco D, I don't know like it should be better when you look at the talent on paper. And I mean, Damari Mathis just got like completely destroyed last week. I think he gave up 8 of 9 catches, 2 touchdowns, both touchdowns. So maybe they figure out something, but Stearns just went on IR. So I don't know. I might still bet this under because I do agree.
Stearns, they signed Jackson they re-signed Jackson, so it's not as big of a deal. They were hoping for big things from Stearns, which hurts, but they do still have Jackson there to go along with Simmons on the back end. The Broncos they generated no pressure at all. Zero pressure.
It's like don't they have Gregory and
Gregory did nothing. He chirped all week and never showed up. Allen did nothing. So I'm hoping that and expecting those guys to bounce back a little bit. But I think that Hal is just his and he's always had this issue where he just tends to hold the ball too long, even dating back to college, and you just can't do that in the NFL. But I expect a better effort from the Denver pass rushers. If we don't get it, though, this week, it's definitely concerning because, that was a poor effort outside of, the always reliable Surtain and Simmons.
Yeah, Surtain is great. That Damari Mathis he kind of ruined their defense, and that with the no pressure. But that's the way you play the games, and now they'll have a chance to make some adjustments. But I did think it was interesting that Russ had a 5.0 ADOT. I mean, that is like half of his career average. So that's just interesting to me. I do think, if Judy comes back, it's still probably going to be short passes, just, relying on a guy like Judy to do some things.
His yak is going to be is big too. But I think Wilson, like if you look at his pass chart, I mean, there's nothing downfield. It was bad, but that was some of it. Like he didn't make any mistakes. It was an efficient outing. They were in position to win the game, and then the defense let them down. But I like the heavier use of play action, and you just got to get Russ into just comfortable throws, and because he's just not the same guy that he was. He can't do what made him great anymore. So I think this is Peyton's solution, and I like it. But you also have to add in some explosiveness, which Judy would certainly help with. But I'll trust Peyton here to make the necessary adjustments at home. Coaching mismatch put this over the edge for me.
All right, for my third pick and the 6th overall of the week to Sunday 6-pack, I'm going with the Chicago Bears plus 2.5. See if you can find a 3. The 2.5 is at plus 100 at BetMGM, so you could probably find a 3 plus, minus 120 or something like that. But this is another one of these games. I already talked about it where, yes, Chicago got outplayed by Green Bay, but it wasn't to the extent that the score showed. And by the same token, even though we were both on the Bucs got a little bit lucky last week against Minnesota. So again, this is week 2. We're still just trying to find spots, and another two teams I still have pretty evenly rated. The Bears, I do think that there's more to their offense than what they showed last week. Green Bay does have a little bit more talent on defense than, maybe the Bucs have. Cause I don't know, like this Bucs, I think the Bucs are good on defense, but then some of like watching them last week, there were guys running open, and I just felt like the Vikings left a lot of points on the field. And I think you said they probably should have had like 28 points or something like that. And I totally agree. Justin Fields, he's going to be able to do some things off script, which, Cousins and the Vikings weren't able to do last week. I think you get a bigger, more of a contribution from DJ Moore this week. Last week couldn't expect too much going against Jair. And this Bucs team, it still projects to be one of the worst in the league. You still have Baker Mayfield. So now you're getting the Bears as an underdog. You're getting the Bucs as a favorite. Baker probably is going to make some mistakes. And I just trust Chicago here to make some plays and kind of rebound from last week. Just a classic buy low, sell high spot on two teams that, most people expect to be bad, but I have the Bears ahead actually of the Bucs. So, last week didn't really change much for me with the Bucs, and the Bears, little concerning, but I'm still gonna.
All you have to say here is you're buying low and selling high, which I agree with. This is the spot. But I was super low on the Bears, lower than you on the Bears coming into the year. and I was a little higher than the market on the Bucs. At 3, I agree. It's Bears or nothing. A couple things concern me, though. Obviously, the Bears D is horrendous. Jordan Love looked like an all-pro and didn't have his number one receiver. And my main question is, well, and also the Bears' offensive line was a disaster, and the Bears predictably got no pressure at all. They did not address that. And by the way, their 2 big offseason acquisitions at linebacker, meaningless. They did nothing. But they got no pressure. I think they had 4 or 5 total pressures. Like, I think Rashawn Gary, who played 10 passing snaps, had more pressures than the Bears as a team. They just didn't generate any pressure at all. How do you get Baker Mayfield to make those mistakes? You got to get pressure on him. So, like, otherwise he can throw an accurate ball, and they have some decent receivers who are going to go up against horrendous secondary, which is also a little banged up now. But on principle, just buy low, sell high with this number, shop around for that 3. I think you have the right side here. I just can't get myself there, just because I was so low in the Bears, and I just don't know how they're going to generate pressure. But at 3 or above, it's definitely Bears or nothing.
You got to fade. I know it's not a pressure spot, but I got to fade Baker here. He is 11-23 in his career as a favorite. That is 32% against the spread. And he's currently on an 0-8 streak. He's failed to cover his last 8 games as a favorite, dating back to October 3rd, 2021. That was the last time Baker Mayfield covered as a favorite, way back when that was like, 3-4 teams ago, a 14-7 win as a 1-point dog against the Vikings. So, yeah, it's just
fading Baker as a favorite. It's never a bad idea. And I mentioned that trend earlier, 38.5% for favorites of 3 or more after winning as a dog the week before, which just speaks to like the overreaction. Like, oh, this team won as a dog, and it's definitely the spot. Oh, and by the way, Ryan Poles after the game signed another linebacker, so we'll see what the Bears can do with another linebacker. But that'll do it for our Sunday 6-pack. As expected, week 2. Ugly as always, just how we like it.
I'll recap. Stuck has the Jets plus 9.5 at the Cowboys, the Broncos minus 3.5 at home against the Commanders, and the Bills minus 9.5 at home against the Raiders. I have the Seahawks plus 5.5 at Detroit, the Falcons plus 1.5 at home against the Pack, and the Bears plus 2.5. See if you can get the 3, but for the contest, we'll go 2.5 at Tampa Bay.
By the way, another good thing for my picks is that if the Jets don't cover, we get to rip Zach Wilson. If the Bills don't cover, I get to rip our producer. Matt Mitchell is a diehard Bills fan. And if the Broncos don't cover as a favorite with Russell Wilson, I get to rip myself. I'll take accountability there.
All right, that was our Sunday 6-pack, and now it is time for our Coach's Pep Talk. This week's Coach's Pep Talk is our producer's longtime favorite pep talk. It comes to us from actor Al Pacino in the 1992 film Glengarry Glen Ross, and got to dedicate it to Kadarius Toney and Sky Moore, a combined 1 of 8 targets for 1 yard. I mean, that was brutal. Help out your all-world quarterback. I mean, y'all were supposed to be the top 2 wide receivers. People were drafting you guys in fantasy. Even if Kelsey's back, like, the Chiefs are going to need receivers at some point in this year. The AFC is loaded. They're going to have to score points. So, Kadarius Toney, Sky Moore, I didn't forget about you too. You were bad too. So, dedicating the pep talk to those guys. Stuck, you and I know.
By the way, I'm also going to dedicate the pep talk to Sean McDermott, and going back, just so I could circle back to my Bills pick. Let's get another cover in this spot. 10-3-1 against the spread after a loss. 5-0 as a favorite of 7 or more. So let's get another cover in this spot.
Ooh, nice favorite trend. You don't usually see those. All right, Stuck. You and I know more memories are made when you're there for live NFL action. And when you need tickets, Ticketmaster has got you covered as the official marketplace of the NFL. Ticketmaster gives you more ways to find your perfect seat. Their interactive seat map gives you 360-degree previews of your section to make sure you have the best view of those pivotal plays. And if your plans change, Ticketmaster gives you more flexibility to sell or transfer your tickets. Plus, mobile tickets make getting in on game day a breeze. And you can even customize your Ticketmaster app to rep your favorite team's colors. Find tickets today at Ticketmaster.com/NFL. Let's get into our favorite total of week number 2. All right. I will start us off here. And I said I was thinking about the Broncos Commanders, but could be some turnovers there, and I'm not sure what's going on with Judy, and I'm a little worried about Mathis and that lack of a pass rush for Denver. So I'm going to go with the Jets Dallas under 39.5. Both of these teams are popping in our luck rankings. The Jets scored, about 4.5 points more than their expected score, and Dallas was about 13 higher. As you mentioned, Dallas got the blocked field goal. Dallas got the pick six. So a lot of things kind of went right for Dallas to put up that 40. But I think the important thing for me is the Jets have shown it against the best. They can shut down Josh Allen. You can shut down pretty much anybody this side of Mahomes. And on the other side, that Dallas defense is going to be a nightmare for a guy like Zach Wilson, who still struggles to make decisions. I think what we started to see last year with Zach Wilson was you're just going to go super run heavy. And you're going to kind of try to hide him. The Jets can do that. Dalvin Cook, Breece Hall looked really good. But even with Breece Hall and that running game, I do think there's a little bit of value here on this under, in the sense that Breece Hall popped yet another long run. Was it 83 yards, I believe it was. But outside of that, the Jets' run game really didn't get much going. And the Cowboys, I don't think they're as good of a run D as a pass D, but I think they're going to be able to load up a little bit. They have guys on the outside that are going to be able to cover, and they're going to trust, and they're going to be able to get pressure on Zach when they need to. But that Jets line, I think that's a real concern. The yards before contact, Breece Hall had negative yards on average before contact. He had all of his yardage was him breaking tackles and making plays. And you can't, he's a very talented guy, but you can't always rely on that. Dalvin Cook averaged just 2.5 yards per carry, only about under a yard before contact. So this Jets run game might be a little bit stifled, but more so, I just think this Jets defense is going to be able to lock down Dallas in a way that the Giants just couldn't do, because their offense and their special teams just put them in a huge hole, and their defense is nowhere near as talented. So give me this under 39.5 Jets Cowboys. I'm expecting like a 16-10 Dallas win, 13-10, 16-10, something like that. You'll probably cover with the Jets, and I'm not expecting this game to get anywhere close to 40 points with these two teams. Then remember, Dallas not going to be as fast as pace as they were under Kellen Moore either, so that also helps.
Yeah, I also think both coaches are going to approach this game with kids' gloves from a play calling perspective, because they're going to say, so the Jets are going to say, look, we just can't turn it over, right? We got to rely on our defense, shorten this game. And the Cowboys are going to say, let's not make a mistake because we're playing Zach Wilson, and we can win this game with our defense. And by the way, my prop last week for when I wrote up Cowboys Jets was Dak to not throw an interception. I thought that it was priced too high just because of the offseason narratives. But Dak came out had a bunch of quotes saying, like, I guarantee you I'm not going to throw whatever this amount of picks. And that was a big focus. That's on his mind early in the season. So I think eventually he's going to open things up. And last week he didn't have to. But I think early this season, he's going to be a little more hesitant to make those riskier throws and be a little bit more conservative overall. So I think that this game just screams defensive Did I cut out there for a sec?
No, I'm here.
Okay. I think this screams just rock fight with two of the best defenses in the NFL. Could be by the end of the season. These could be 1-2. This is. I agree with you here. I'm actually going to go with an over for my favorite total of the week again.
2 in a row.
Shocking. Yeah, last week I ended up getting 43. Waited on the 43. It was a mistake. Grant, one, Andrews was out, which was huge. The Ravens lost 2 starting offensive linemen. The one thing I underestimated was just the Texans, and we'll talk about that game, but their offensive line, they're down to their, they even lost Fant during the game, but they're down to their third center, their second guard, their third tackle. And in that offense, that it's a Shanahan offense, the hardest thing to get right is the offensive line. In that scheme, and it's obviously going to take some time under Bobby Slowick. So, and that showed up on the road with a rookie quarterback. So the Texans just couldn't take advantage of Humphrey being out, and they were under pressure a ton. So, yeah, that was an incorrect play there. But I'm going to go with 2 quarterbacks I do trust in Stafford and Brock Purdy, who looked tremendous last week. I'm going to go over 44.5 in the 49ers and Rams. Circle of Life in the NFC West, which always reference, states that the Shanahan owns the Rams. And this game's at the Rams technically, but we know there's not much home field there, especially when they play the 49ers. It's close to nothing. But this 49ers offense is humming. Mm-hmm. And we talked about, I think this total's a little lower because of what the Rams did last week. But we were talking early in the season, like, how are we going to set Rams totals? Without Kupp and, well, number one, Stafford looked tremendous. He looked as healthy as I've seen him in a long time. Some of the throws that he was making, and Puka Nacua was awesome. And they were going downfield, and that's how you have to attack this 49ers defense. That's where they're vulnerable, is downfield. They give up explosive plays. Their weakness is in their secondary. And from how Stafford looked last week in a game script where they should be behind, I think he can put up enough points here. And the 49ers should have no problem scoring against this Rams defense that really just benefited from a horrific game from Geno Smith. 2 tackles being out, a guard that just could not block Aaron Donald. He was basically a tackling dummy out there. So I think this total should be closer to 47, 48. And I just don't think the way the 49ers offenses looked, they should get to 28, 31. I mean, every time since Purdy's taken over, they get to 30 every game. And I need Stafford to get to 17? Yeah, I'll take that. Give me the 49ers Rams over. It's not like I'm sold now on this Rams defense. This Rams defense after last week, they're still a horrific unit outside of Aaron Donald. And I think Stafford can do enough playing from behind. And then even when the game's out of hand, with what I saw last week and his arm strength being back, to get this game over. So give me over 44.5. Yeah,
I'd be interested in the Niners team total possibly as well. Because if one side does, come back down to earth, it's going to be the Rams, not going against the Seahawks defense this week. But I agree. I think the Niners, Purdy looked great, and he was under pressure a good amount too, and still was making some throws. And that's, to me, what separates him from Jimmy Garoppolo. It's when the play breaks down, like, Jimmy really has nothing to do. He can't really move around. He usually ends up just hitching and still throwing into a tight window. Maybe it's his second read, but it's still a tight window. Whereas Purdy, just a little more under control and can make things happen on the fly. So
here's the point totals for the 49ers since Purdy took over. They scored 30 last week against the Steelers, 33 against Miami, 35 against the Bucs, 37 against Washington, 37 against the Raiders, 38 against the Cardinals, and 21 against Seattle. I mean, they easily cleared 30 in every one of those games except for one on a Thursday night game. And yeah, I mean, And those defenses, they're not great, but they're all on par, and probably better than what we're going to see from the Rams this year.
Yeah. Niners team total is 26.5 at BetMGM. So interesting.
I like that.
Yeah. Okay. So Stuck is going Niners Rams over 44.5. I'm going Jets Cowboys under 39.5. Now it is time for our favorite teaser of the week. All right. If you're not familiar with teasers, it's when you get an extra allotment of points, which is usually 6, to parlay on multiple spread bets. So, for example, if you had a 2-team 6-point teaser with a 7.5 point favorite becomes a 1.5 point favorite, a 7.5 point underdog would become a 13.5 point underdog. Stuck. I know you have some content out explaining how you go about these teasers.
Yeah, I will have something in my preview, my NFL preview every week now. So make sure you check out the Action Network app and actionnetwork.com for that. I'll also tweet out my weekly preview every week. And ideally, you want to tease across 3 and 0 when possible, but I go into all the details there. And for this week, I'm going to follow those principles, and I'm going to tease the Falcons, which you already talked about. I think Packers a little bit overvalued here, especially when you attribute when you take account of their injuries, and then I think the matchup for the Falcons' run-heavy offense works in their favor here. And I'm going to pair them with the Steelers. And Steelers, but that's on Monday night, and we're not covering those games. So if you're looking just for a Sunday teaser, I would go with the Patriots. You're teasing them from 2.5 to 8.5. I much prefer the Steelers because you're getting a much lower scoring projected game than Miami, New England. And New England has wide receiver injury issues. Both their guards didn't play last week. Their offensive line is a mess. Now, the Miami defense is bad, but I'll be curious to see how this New England defense tries to stop. We talked about this all offseason. I said, okay, let's see what McDaniel does to adjust to what the Chargers did last year to shut down their offense. The amount of different motions, pre-snap motions that Tyreek Hill used, most on the same side of the field. So he's not going to the other side of the field where you're prepared for it. Some going into the backfield, coming out. I mean, it was amazing to watch, and he was unstoppable with all of the motion that they were utilizing. Curious to see the game plan Belichick comes up, but just simple math going from 2.5 to 8.5 there, and then getting the Falcons over a touchdown.
Yep. Don't mind it. A lot of these 1.5, 2.5 spreads this week. I'm going to actually tease the Niners down from 8.5 to 2.5. Kyle Shanahan has won his last 8 regular season games against Sean McVay. Did lose a playoff game in there, but 8-1, if you want to be specific. All time, including the postseason, Shanahan is 10-3 against the spread against McVay. And of those 8, consecutive regular season wins, 3 of them came by a field goal. So, I'm not underestimating the Rams here because, we've seen Sean McVay kind of come out with a great game plan and kind of get more, do more with less. Last week, obviously got some help as well, but I still feel confident in the Niners to continue this domination. I mean, I just think they look really good. I think Purdy is great. And I think that this Rams defense is, it's going to have some problems this week against all these skill players for the 49ers, but it's a division game. It's on the road for the Niners, so I'll tease them down, and then I'll tease the Texans up from 1.5.
Is it really though on the road? It's not really.
I mean, it's not really on the road, but traveling a little bit. It's a SoFi. Maybe I should go to that game actually. But the Houston Texans plus 1.5 is the number. I'll tease it up to 7.5. You and I both, I think, entered the season higher on the Texans than the Colts. I think the Colts are going to have some growing pains, just like the Texans are, but I trust D'Amico here. And if I'm getting this up to 7.5, now you're really putting the Colts in a tough spot because, we saw them struggle in some short yardage spots. They missed a tush push, which I've never seen fail before. They couldn't get it in the end zone to get the cover late in the game with a 1st and goal at the 5. So, maybe the Colts eke this out, but I have a hard time seeing them blow the Texans out in this spot at home for the Texans. I think this Texan defense is pretty solid, and you're going to start to see some mistakes from Anthony Richardson, and you already saw him take a big hit, so we'll see, how he kind of reacts this week. But overall, I like this Texan team. I think it's a better team overall than the Colts, and I think, Stroud wasn't great last week, but, he dropped back a ton, got some reps in, and, hit Nico Collins a good bit. Still hasn't unleashed Dalton Schultz, but I think Dameon Pierce has a better game this week, and I think D'Amico is going to be able to keep this Texan team close. I think Texans in general, this is going to be a team that probably is pretty feisty all year, even if they don't win many games. So I'll tease them up to 7.5 along with the Niners down. All right, so Stuck has the Falcons at 7.5, the Patriots at 8.5, and I got the Niners -2.5 and the Texans +7.5. Before we get into our Underdog Moneyline Parlay, as a reminder, the Action Network podcast is presented by BetMGM. Use bonus code ACTION when signing up to get $1,500 paid back in bonus bets if your first bet loses. For new users in Arizona, Colorado, Illinois, Indiana, Iowa, Louisiana, Maryland, Massachusetts, Michigan, New Jersey, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Tennessee, Virginia, West Virginia, and Wyoming. Terms and conditions apply. Must be 21 or older. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. All right, Stuck, you started off the season right. Hit the Dolphins on the money line for last week against the Chargers. My Steelers were never close. This week, where are you going?
Yeah, let's go with the team you just talked about, the Houston Texans, small underdog here. I said before the season that I have them power rated higher than the Colts, and now they're at home. And look, I am a bit worried about the offensive line, but you are playing at home, and it's not really a great Colts defense. So I think this will be a nice break for CJ Stroud. And George Fant was practicing today, which is a good sign, because if he doesn't, then you got to move Josh Jones to tackle, and you're bringing Michael Dieter in, and you're already down a bunch of guys, and it gets real messy really quick. I am a little bit worried about their safety situation. We'll see if Jalen Petrie plays. He was in the hospital with a bruised lung, and Jimmy Ward's also questionable. But I'm not a believer in this Colts team. I think this sets up for a Texans win at home, and I ultimately think that CJ Stroud is still more NFL ready. So came in before the season saying that the Texans are better. I got them at home here as a dog. So I'm going to take them in a game where I power rate them higher and make them a favorite. So let's go with the Texans.
Yeah, I mean, the Colts, hung in there for 3 quarters against Jacksonville, but the Colts are not a team that should be favored really against anybody.
And again, that's week 1 divisional game. We see that stuff all the time, not overreacting to, and they didn't even cover at the end of the day.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, because they couldn't get their short yardage issues, which is weird because you'd think with Richardson, but maybe they missed Jonathan Taylor more than we know. Anyway,
well, that's the problem. These mobile quarterbacks that don't that aren't used to going under center. We've seen the adjustment with Hurts. Sneak the fucking ball. It's not that difficult. Or get a quarterback on your roster who's comfortable and just bring him in. Doesn't matter if teams know you're going to sneak it, especially when you can push. Although the push didn't work for the Colts, but you see, the shotgun 4th and 1 attempts, then a handoff. I mean, the difference in the conversion percentage between that and just a simple sneak is stunning. Anyway, who are you going with?
You know what? I got to do it. I know you were thinking about this team too, but got to go with the Titans here as a +140 dog at home against the Chargers. This Charger team, just betting on them to Charger. It seems like one thing gets fixed and another thing breaks. This time, they were able to run the ball, but the pass offense wasn't as efficient as I thought it could have been, and they gave up nearly 600 total yards. And now, a lot of the Chargers' success last week did come on the ground. You got Eckler a little banged up, but this Titan defense, this is a defense that can stop the run and make the Chargers one-dimensional, and I think that's going to lead to a couple of mistakes here and there for Justin Herbert. And on the other side, that Saints defense gave the Titans a lot of problems. They were lucky to escape with that cover because they kicked the field goal. But this Charger defense, we've seen this now. The last time we saw the Charger defense, it was giving up 30 points in the second half to the Jaguars, and then 36 and nearly 600 yards of offense to the Dolphins. So if the Titans offense is going to get off the schneid, I think it could be this week. I thought Derrick Henry looked great. I thought Spears looked great. Didn't really get Burks involved. Tannehill just overthrew Chig on a short touchdown. Tannehill left a lot of throws on the field. So I think that this week, home dog, taking the Titans here. Vrabel 9-6 straight up as a home money line home underdog. So give me Tennessee.
Yeah, I like this one. It was the other one I considered. The Eckler injury is pretty worrisome for sure. The only thing I'm worried about here is the Titans secondary, how it will hold up. The corners were pretty bad outside of McCreary, and you got Fulton dealing with a hamstring, Hooker concussion, and then Tannehill had a disastrous day. Even though the offensive line held up pretty well, better than I thought. Dillard had some struggles at left tackle at times, but it wasn't pressure that got to him. He was just missing. You hope that he bounces back and he's not just washed, because that was a terrible game. But yeah, Vrabel as a dog can never go wrong. For what it's worth, he's 23-9-1 against the spread, 72% as a dog of 3 or more, covering by an average margin of 6.1 points per game. So let's go a little. And by the way, between teams that are 0-1 in week 2 have historically hit at a 63% clip. So let's go a little AFC South moneyline underdog parlay with the Titans and Texans.
You parlay those two together. You got the Texans at +105, the Titans +140 at BetMGM. Just under 4-1 odds when you parlay them. If you want to check other parlay odds, be sure to check out the Action Network betting odds calculator at actionnetwork.com. Now it is time for meaningful to some, the games that we haven't covered in any other segment, but
don't forget about Survivor, by the way. We got yelled at for that last year.
That's coming out. That's coming. We're going to close the pod with Survivor, but we got to get to the couple of games that we're not going to talk about, and then we'll wrap it up with Survivor. The first is Ravens at Bengals, and the line is 3.5 in favor of the Bengals. I am tempted to take the Ravens despite all their injuries, kind of a contrarian spot, but I do have flashbacks to the other times when the Ravens have been banged up, particularly in the secondary, and Cincinnati made him pay. And I do think Burrow is going to bounce back sooner than later. Maybe it's not this week, maybe it is, but still, Lamar Jackson is 10-1 against the spread as an underdog, 91%. Harbaugh is 60%, above 60%. 59%, excuse me, 44-30 all time. So it is tempting, especially getting the hook here. But I do think that there's a possibility that this Ravens secondary just can't hang with this Bengal pass game. What do you think?
Yeah, that's the concern. I think the right line is 3.5 now with all of the injuries. You're talking, you might be missing 6 key starters. Dobbins is out. Marcus Williams, one of the better safeties in the league, is out. And then 2 of your most important offensive linemen, your center and left tackle, and Linderbaum and Stanley, are probably out. Marlon Humphrey's already out. That's massive because that means that you're going to have most likely Brandon Stevens and Ronald Darby trying to cover Chase and Higgins. That's not great. It means you also bring in Mustafa and Macari to the offensive line. Meanwhile, Mark Andrews might not play again. I think he's 50-50. That's huge. They really missed him last week. And the Bengals, on the other hand, are injury-free. The one thing that will work in the Ravens' favor, their defense, when they've had full-strength secondary, they've been able to fluster Burrow in the past couple meetings, and he's done really nothing against them. But when their secondary is not healthy, they just can't hold up. There's just such a talent gap. And, for the one good thing I'll say about the Ravens offensive line, like Simpson and Moses played really well. And Flowers obviously looked great in his first start. The Burrow was obviously rusty. We talked about that. And that has carried over to the second game in each of the past 2 seasons. So, last year the Bengals lost to Cooper Rush in the second game.
Yeah. I mean, great Cowboys defense, probably better defense than this Ravens.
Yes, they're a much better defense. Yeah. But Burrow was definitely rusty still and not in rhythm. So that's what the Ravens have to hope for here. Because Burrow was obviously under pressure the entire game. The offensive line was awful. Jonah Williams struggled at right tackle. You have a new left tackle who I'm not really a believer in Brown. And it's, and then you still have a terrible left guard in Volston. So I don't know if I believe in the Ravens pass rush yet. It was better than I thought, but you were playing against a Texans offensive line that was down to piecemeal. It was like 4th and 5th string guys. So we'll see. It's really going to come down to, is Burrow crisp? I mean, like last week he just wasn't. I mean, T. Higgins was 5th in air yards and in no yards, which is pretty crazy. But there's definitely holes in this Bengals team. The offensive line, I think, is worse when at full strength. Burrow's rusty, but he'll be fine. But the defense, there's definitely a drop-off. I mean, we saw Bates shine at safety. Nick Scott, he struggled, and there's definitely a drop-off there. But, I think 3.5 is the right line with all of these injuries, especially if Andrews is out. I can see it. Harbaugh as a dog is always worth a look. But the injuries on the offensive line and secondary going on the road, I would need at least 4.5 to consider it here. Just too much uncertainty with all these injuries. And I don't know if Burrow is going to be when he's getting right back. So it's a pass for me.
Yeah, that's right. I'm going to monitor this because I do, Andrews being out is big, but Zay Flowers, he looks like a star. And that was a guy that, of all the receivers in fantasy, I was like, I don't think it's going to be Smith and Jigba or Addison with the clearest path to just monster value right from the jump. I think it's going to be Zay. And sure enough, what do you get? Like nine catches in week 1. So that helps a little. I could see this game being close down to the end. I could see the Ravens losing like another heartbreaker. But so I will be monitoring this because it's not, I feel like the market is just, it's kind of accounting for all what's going wrong with the Ravens, but the Bengals aren't really in peak form either. So now you're talking about a divisional game with the hook.
This is a slam spot I had circled for how the Ravens match up on defense. They should have beat them in the playoffs with their backup quarterback, triple revenge, and then the Bengals had to go and shit the bed, and then the Ravens' whole team gets hurt again. Yeah. So it really spoiled the spot.
Yeah. But I'm going to definitely be monitoring this because if it's gonna hit 4, especially, I might dabble. Yeah. And then we got the Chiefs at the Jags. Chiefs 3.5-point favorites. The total is 51, so it's one of the I think it's the highest total of the week. What are your thoughts here? We know Mahomes, like that 3 is exactly kind of where the trends reverse for Mahomes. So now it's up to 3.5. The trends favor the Jaguars, but Mahomes is 13-3 straight up off a loss.
Yeah, I mean the most likely outcome here, to my opinion, like if you need Mahomes to win, he's 14-4 against the spread when he's not favored by more than 3 points. If I had to guess how this game goes, Chiefs win by 3. I trust Mahomes, Reed with extra rest to get this done. Chris Jones back against the Jaguars offensive line that already had some question marks, now has injury questions in the interior with Sheriff and Fortner, who both might miss, which is huge against Chris Jones. We know the Jags defense is trash. And if the Chiefs get Kelsey back, I think that I make this Chiefs minus 3.6. I'm lower on the Jags in the market if Kelsey plays and Chris Jones plays. If not, then, I'd be actually like a tad under 3. So this is all about the number. I would not lay 3.5 with the Chiefs. I took a little tiny bit on openers where I tweeted about 2.5 minus 2.5 with the Chiefs. I would take that if it's there. At 3.5, I would actually, depending on Kelsey's status, is what I'd have to monitor. I wouldn't blame anyone for taking the Jags. And I would not look anywhere but Jags overs for now. That defense, I think, is bad and has injuries. That offense with Ridley and how fast that they've been going and how pass heavy that they've been since the second half of last year. And Mahomes is going to come out with a vengeance. And if he has Kelsey back, and those receivers aren't going to play as bad as they did last week, and he's going up against this Jaguars secondary, should pick it apart. So it's either over or nothing. And then the Chiefs, Jags, it's the most important number in the NFL, right around 3. It depends on the number. At 3.5 for me, it's no play. At 3, I lean Chiefs. At 2.5, I like the Chiefs.
Trivia question for you. When is the last time Andy Reid started 0-2?
Andy Reid 0-2. All right, so I'm thinking. Well, like you always, the reason you ask that question, you always got to think about how the person is phrasing the question. So,
the Chiefs. Andy Reid with the Chiefs. I'll give you that.
Oh, with the Chiefs.
Yeah. With the Chiefs. So it is with the Chiefs. It's not. We're not going back to Philly days. But what year? Which year was it? It did happen. Which year was it?
Yeah, I don't think it. So it has not happened with Mahomes. I know that. So I'm gonna say. I'm going to say 2014.
Yup, nailed it. He lost to Jake Locker 26-10 in week 1. And then Peyton Manning and the Broncos 24-17 in week 2. And they still managed to finish 9-7, but they missed the playoffs that year. And then, ever since then, it's gotten at least one. It's funny though, because the year before that, that was Reed's first year.
That was Alex Smith, right? That was Alex Smith year.
The year before that was 2013, which was Reed's first year. They won their first 9. But all 9 games before the bye, they win. And then they lost 3 straight, end up finishing 11-5, lose to that Colts on that crazy 45-44 game to Andrew Luck. But 2014, they lose 2 in a row. And then ever since then, they've gotten at least one. With Mahomes, like you said, it's never been in doubt. So yeah, the Chiefs are going to win this game. It's just by how much, and 3.5, I would not trust them. Just take the money line if you really want to invest.
Yeah.
All right. Let's close it out with our Survivor Pool pick of the week. All right, this is an ugly week. Where we both had Washington. We didn't talk about it on the episode, but hopefully you caught our tweets. I think we put in the show notes as well. But we'll do the Survivor every week from here on out. So where are you going this week?
Yeah, so we got Washington out of the way. We've talked about Washington's schedule. Like when were you going to use Washington again? And they almost blew that. But I was happy to get them out of the way. I don't care if it was semi-popular. This week, I am getting a little riskier. I think it's a good week to do that. Like the Cowboys and the Bills are the obvious choices, but I want to save them for later in the season. So a team that's a favorite that I think is going to win, that I actually bet as a favorite. So Russell Wilson's could really ruin my weekend, but I'm going to go
one
with
of the
Broncos. Yeah, one of the Wilsons. I'm going to go with the Broncos at home against Washington. I think that they avoid a 0-2 start. If you look, like the rest of their schedule, granted, they get the Jets at home now without Rodgers. But like at Miami, after this, it's at Miami, at Chicago, at Kansas City, home against Green Bay, Kansas City, at Buffalo, Minnesota, Cleveland, at Houston. Like it's Houston later in the year on the road, at the Chargers, at the Lions, Patriots, Chargers, at the Raiders. Like I would not feel comfortable using them in any other game, really. So I think this is a good spot to get the Broncos out of the way.
Yeah, I don't mind it. It's a little bit of a contrarian play. I mean, I think there's also something to be said for just not using the Broncos in Survivor this year. Throw that out there. But I do agree that you want to go a little bit riskier this week. See if you can get some separation. So I'm going to go with the Giants here and just continue to fade Arizona. I think the Giants are, it is on the road, but I do think they're a little better equipped to take care of business against Arizona, because the thing that Washington did to keep Arizona in the game, besides the O-line, which could be an issue for the Giants as well, but is turn the ball over. And, the Giants did turn the ball over a couple times last week, but that's not usually their MO. Daniel Jones, especially in a game like this where, he knows he's not going to have to put up a ton of points. Usually you can count on him not to turn the ball over. And when I look at this Arizona team, I mean, they got 3 turnovers from Washington, so they had a +1 differential, so they kept it close. But Josh Dobbs averaged 4.4 yards per attempt. And you say, okay, well, Washington's defense is good. Yeah, but for his career, Joshua Dobbs averages 5.1 yards per attempt on 115 pass attempts. So I'm just not really expecting anything from him offensively. And then Arizona averaged under 4 yards a carry as well. So I just don't think there's going to be enough here. I think the Giants are going to be able to do enough, whether it's scheme, whether it's talent. They'll find a way to get a win here. And it's not really a team that I'm looking to use any other time either. So hopefully, maybe your Jets surprise the Cowboys or something like that. But I like taking the Giants as shorter road favorites here and getting against still what I think is the worst team in the league. So still a decent value, even though it's not the largest spread.
Yeah, Giants' schedule the rest of the way is brutal. And by the way, sometimes there's you could look at trends, because I'll mention this trend a lot. But there's trends that could fit both teams. And sometimes you could have people that cherry pick trends and then just you can make a case for one side. But in this case, the Giants are off a 35-point plus loss. Teams over the past 20 years that have lost by 35 plus, 75, 41, and 5 against the spread, 64.7% covering by more than a field goal per game. However, there's teams that usually lose by 35 plus are usually underdogs the next week. When they're laying over a field goal, they're only 8-9 against the spread. Also, teams off a shutout loss, 58% against the spread over the past 30 years, but just 23 and 24 against the spread as a favorite. And as I mentioned before, week 2 dogs between 0-1 teams, 47, 25, and 3 against the spread, over 65%, which applies to the Titans, Cardinals, and Texans. So, Giants off of a shutout loss, off of 35. Normally, I'd be looking to back them, but this number is just too high. And the Giants aren't a team I'm looking to back as a favorite. But I do agree that this is a good survivor pick. But there's some trends that fit both the Cardinals and Giants here. So that game from a spread perspective is a pure pass for me.
Yeah, maybe the line will get up to 6 and just tease it down to 0 or something.
Yeah.
But as it stands, I don't want to weigh the number either. Again, just some of these teams getting favored on the road already. I mean, you have the Packers road favorites. You have the Colts a road favorite. You have, just some really odd road favorites. Giants 5.5, about to be 6. Yeah, it's not going to go well for some of these teams. So, I'm just taking for Survivor, and that's going to wrap it for our Week 2 Action Network podcast. Thank you for listening. We'll be back Thursday all season long. As a reminder, our friends at the Favorites podcast still have $117,000 up for grabs in their free weekly NFL Pick'em contest. Sign up is still open. Favorites.actionnetwork.com. That's favorites.actionnetwork.com. Be sure to enter. You can't get paid if you don't play. And you can hear more of me this week with my guy Kerner, talking fantasy, DFS, and all that good stuff on the Fantasy Flex Pod. You can hear Stuck talking college ball over on the Big Bets on Campus podcast Friday mornings. Stuck is on X at Stucky2. I'm at Chris Raybon, and we are at those same handles on the free award-winning Action Network app. Until week 3, let's get this shmoney.
Let's go.